David Baldacci is one of the most popular writers in America. His novels, most of them thrillers, have sold more than 150 million copies and been translated into 40 languages. His latest novel, The 620 Man, is a cat and mouse story featuring a former detective and a dangerous con artist. Last week, David Baldacci was in Kennebunkport and spoke at a fundraiser for the town's Graves Memorial Public Library. It turns out he's a real fan of Maine. He's been visiting here for nearly 30 years and even has a family connection to Aroostook County.
My wife's grandparents are from Fort Canton, Madawaska, French Canadian. So I tell you, when we drove up there for the first time, it's really funny when you're driving and you see a sign that says, okay, Interstate 95 ends. You get off at 95, then you get on Route 1 and you drive for a while. Then it says Route 1 ends, and then you keep going. I looked at my wife and said, are we still in the United States? What is going on here?
There aren't too many people from the Washington, D.C. Metroplex who end up in Fort Kent, I've got to say. So good on you.
Yes, thank you. I try to get out.
Your book that's coming out in the fall is set in coastal Maine.
It is. It's called The Edge. It's a sequel to The 620 Man that came out last summer. And I was thinking about a geographical location to set it, and I decided small town coastal Maine, a town sort of full of secrets and some history, fit the bill. It's north of here. It's a made-up name, but I love the coastal area.
You are here this evening to do an event at the public library in Kennebunkport, and this is a cause that's really close to your heart, promoting reading, promoting literacy. You've been doing it for years. You've done it all over the country. Why is it so important to you?
It's really the last bastion of democracy, if you think about it. And it all depends on citizens in order for us to make good choices at the voting booth. I've always thought that the verbs to think and the verbs to read are exactly the same. You can't do one without the other. It starts with one book, one reader at a time. Once we build through that, anything is possible for people.
We, of course, have more information at our fingertips than at any time in history, but I think it's perhaps fair to say that people read fewer books than they did 50 or 75 years ago. Does that alarm you?
I've gotten to the point where people say, you know, I know you're a writer, but I just don't have time to read. And I used to say, you know, that's okay, people are busy. Now I always say, I am so sorry for you. And they go, why? And I said, because you have no idea what you're missing. It is like a sort of a vital component of every human being's existence you're missing out on. I pray that you come up with a different decision in the future and you open a book.
How many hours a day do you read?
I read throughout the day, and I always have more than one book going. Books got me through my youth. I grew up in Richmond in the 60s and 70s in a heavily segregated society, but books saved me. Going to the library saved me and gave me probably my greatest attribute, which is empathy. So I read every day. I read everything from mysteries to thrillers to literary fiction to nonfiction to biographies, because every day reading a book allows me to learn something I didn't know the day before.
Everything changed for you when you sold Absolute Power, your first novel that you sold. It went for an eye-popping sum of money, which absolutely astonished you.
Yes.
When you broke the news to your wife about the sale of that book, what did you say to her, and what was her response?
Well, I called her from work, and I said, honey, you know, I've got really great news. And she said, what is it? And I said, we sold the book. The book sold. This is exactly what she says to me. She says, oh my God, that's fantastic. She goes, now, how much will it cost us? Because she thought, you know, it was just a vanity press and I was paying someone to print the book. I said, no, the great thing is they're actually going to pay us. She goes, all right, that's really good news. Congratulations. And then I sort of told her all the details about it. And then she later told me she ran upstairs and threw up. Because she just realized in that moment that maybe our whole lives are going to change. She just realized sort of this abrupt slap that, oh my God, not that it's a bad thing that it's happened, but it's like it's going to change really drastically.
You mentioned that you wrote 5 books during the pandemic. Clearly you don't have to. You're hugely successful. You never have to write another word again. So it's obviously immensely rewarding to you to continue to tell stories.
It is. I can't get it out of my system. I am the unhappiest when I'm between stories, when I'm not working on something. And You're right. I don't have to go out and do events anymore, tour and all that, but I'm part of this ecosystem that's writers and readers and publishers and booksellers. And like any ecosystem, if one element doesn't carry its load, the ecosystem eventually dies. I never want this ecosystem to die because I think it really makes the world a lot better. If everybody read books, I can tell you we'd have a far better world than we have right now. So it's just important for me to keep doing what I'm doing.
Earlier in the day, before he talked with us, David Baldacci visited the Graves Library in Kennebunkport. He and his wife bought several books from the book sale pile, then purchased several more at a bookstore in town. What did they do with them? Well, they left them all in one of those small free library boxes which they'd seen in town. They donated about a dozen copies in all, a wide range for a variety of readers, including a Captain Underpants book. Our thanks to the folks at Graves Memorial Public Library for helping to arrange that interview, and to the folks at the Kennebunk River Club where we talk.